In the landscape of the modern coffee industry, the emergence of paper filters and metal meshes serves a singular, clinical purpose to violently strip away non-water soluble particulates and rich lipids. Yet, this physical filtration simultaneously castrates the most primal biochemical code of the coffee bean. Turkish coffee stands as humanity, its most absolute, uncompromising physical preservation of the bean in extraction history. It demands that coffee beans be pulverized to an absolute dust-like limit and fiercely rejects any form of filtration, boiling the grounds directly with water. Throughout this continuous boiling process, absent any interception by paper filters, the bean, its native cafestal and cowheel, are 100% preserved in the cup. This hyperconcentration of lipid components drastically elevates the liquid, its viscosity, while constructing a physical foam barrier several millimeters thick on the surface. Operating like an airtight seal, this dense foam layer traps the highly volatile aromatic hydrocarbons that easily escape under high heat, engineering an exceptionally intense, heavy, and full-bodied mouthfeel. It was this exact black potion, completely free of chemical compromise, that unleashed a nationwide storm across the 16th century Ottoman Empire. When coffee migrated from Yemen to Constantinople, it rapidly catalyzed the birth of humanity's earliest public political spaces, the coffee houses. Prior to this, draconian Ottoman laws strictly forbade civilians from gathering in public to debate state politics. However, the fierce central nervous system stimulation delivered by caffeine turned coffee houses into breeding grounds for imperial dissidents, scholars, and particularly the fiercely independent janissaries. Stimulated by this dark water, they remained razor sharp through the night, deconstructing the Sultan, as decrees and directly plotting multiple armed insurrections to overthrow the throne. This triggered absolute political panic among the ruling elite. To sever this pipeline of political alertness, Sultan Murad Avith unleashed a terrifyingly cruel prohibition, declaring coffee an illegal poison and systematically demolishing coffee houses. Anyone caught consuming coffee faced immediate execution by beating on the first offense. If they dared repeat it, they were sewn into a heavy leather sack and thrown like garbage into the violent, rushing currents of the Bosphorus Strait. Yet, biochemical addiction completely triumphed over the terror of death. Black market smuggling ran rampant, and the prohibition ultimately collapsed under the weight of universal civil resistance. Coffee became so hardwired into Ottoman society that it was explicitly codified into civil law. If a husband failed to provide his wife with her legally mandated daily quota of coffee beans, the wife possessed an absolute, unconditional legal right to sue for divorce. A tiny seed, while using its biochemical toxicity to defy the Sultan, simultaneously weaponized itself as the earliest legal sovereignty instrument for women in the ancient Middle East. Brewing this empire, shaking fluid requires an elegant mastery of heat transfer engineering. Thermodynamic sand brewing, traditional Turkish coffee, avoids direct contact with open flames. Instead, the copper sesviv is buried deep within a sandbed heated to 200 degrees Celsius to 300 degrees Celsius. Sand acts as an extraordinary thermal reservoir, providing perfectly uniform, slow heat conduction that entirely eliminates the localized carbonization and scorching caused by open fire. Across 3 precise cycles of foaming and boiling, caffeine dissociation reaches its absolute physical limit. Even as you consume the beverage, the actual extraction never truly stops, because it remains unfiltered. The mud-like coffee powder precipitates to the bottom of the cup, maintaining a continuous, subtle secondary material, exchange with the remaining liquid. When the fluid is spent, the thick sludge left behind ceases to be discarded waste. Instead, it evolves into a globally renowned cultural ritual, tessiography, or Turkish coffee fortune-telling. Due to the extreme viscosity of the liquid, The dehydrating coffee sediment leaves behind fluid dynamic tracks on the inner walls of the porcelain cup that mimic cryptography. The ancient Ottomans firmly believed that the ash of these black beans held the spatial codes of the timeline itself. From the gallows of geopolitical warfare to the mystical lines tracing fate at the bottom of a cup, Turkish coffee uses its rawest, most unyielding grain to prove a thesis to modern industrial civilization. Those elements ruthlessly scrubbed away by the paper filter are precisely what constitute the heaviest, truest textures of human civilization. Espresso serves as the foundational cornerstone of the modern coffee kingdom. It was born in Italy during the height of the Industrial Revolution. Originally engineered as a rapid extraction method to get workers back to their factory stations without delay. While minuscule in volume, its aroma and flavor are intensely compressed, crowned by a thick, golden layer of foam known as crema, the very soul of the drink. Beyond being a daily ritual downed standing up at Italian espresso bars, it serves as the essential genetic matrix for all milk-based coffee variants, from lattes to cappuccinos. In fluid physics, conventional drip coffee relies strictly on gravity for slow, solid liquid dissolution, which extracts a mere 20% of the bean as soluble matter. Espresso, by contrast, is a violent extraction of plant cells leveraged by fluid dynamics to draw out the absolute essence of a coffee bean in a mere 25 seconds. A highly complex multiphase emulsion must be constructed. Under an extreme external force of 9 bars, 9 atmospheres of pressure, near boiling water is violently driven through a tightly compacted puck of coffee grounds. This high pressure fundamentally alters the solubility constants of the liquid, triggering a fierce physical emulsification between the insoluble lipids inside the coffee cells and microscopic carbon dioxide gas. The result is a hyper-concentrated, micron-level suspended colloid. This is the origin of the dense, leopard-spotted golden layer of crema. This gas barrier, tightly locked by a sophisticated lipid network, does more than just block the volatile aromatic hydrocarbons from escaping. It fundamentally alters the absorption efficiency of the drink at the level of pharmacokinetics. When this hyper-concentrated compound of caffeine and lipids hits the human gastrointestinal tract, it bypasses ordinary digestive delays, striking the adenosine receptors of the central nervous system at several times the speed of standard drip coffee. It is not an artisanal beverage meant for leisurely sipping. It is a potent neural awakening injection engineered through precision mechanical physics. The espresso that is endowed with romantic middle-class sentimentality in contemporary boutique cafés contains not a single gene of romance in its historical origin. It was forged during the Second Industrial Revolution, conceived as a cold calculus of capital, ruthlessly squeezing the labor time of the working class. In the late 19th century, the industrial hubs of Milan and Turin were charging forward into the golden era of automated assembly lines. Factory owners, however, confronted a severe logistical bottleneck. Their laborers were fiercely dependent on coffee, but the prevailing flannel drip or Turkish brewing methods required 20 to 30 minutes per cup. This meant that massive assembly lines had to grind to a halt multiple times a day purely for workers to wait on their caffeine fix, resulting in catastrophic productivity deficits. To reclaim this wasted, invisible time, Milanese engineer Luigi Bezzera harnessed contemporary steam dynamics in 1901 to build a monstrous machine that used boiler steam pressure to force water through a chamber of tightly packed grounds. Merchant Desiderio Pavoni acquired and commercialized the patent. This machine could manufacture a cup of concentrated coffee in under 30 seconds. Its chosen name, espresso, carries a literal definition in Italian. Express or fast. The sole design brief of this mechanism was to radically compress the resting time of the proletariat, forcing them to down the liquid and immediately return to the shop floor, to continue sweating out their physical energy. It was a machine born exclusively to weaponize labor efficiency and force reset the human biological clock. While early Bezerin machines were undeniably fast, they relied entirely on the expansion of steam itself, yielding a weak pressure of only 1.5 to 2 bars. Furthermore, the excessive steam temperatures scorched the coffee grounds, introducing harsh, charred, and intensely bitter impurities into the cup. This limitation persisted until 1947, when Achille Gaggia revolutionized the industry by inventing the spring piston system. By regulating water temperatures to a non-boiling 90 degrees Celsius and relying entirely on the physical tension of a mechanical spring, his design unleashed a net pressure of 9 bars instantly. This single technological leap did more than just strip away the pyrolytic destruction of high-temperature steam on flavor. It allowed humanity to witness the birth of crema, the miracle of multiphase emulsification, for the first time in history. With this breakthrough, espresso achieved its final, evolved form over the subsequent half-century. This industrial monster, engineered to exploit workers, executed a total counter-enclosure of global fast-paced society. Crawling out from the factory floors of Italy, it established itself as the absolute liquid foundation of modern globalized cities. Whether it is the lattes and cappuccinos sweeping through Western capitals or the iced Americanos dominating East Asian business districts, the biochemical chip and genetic bedrock remain this exact 30-milliliter shot of espresso. Humanity used high-pressure thermodynamics to conquer time, and this fluid format turned around to format humanity. From the clock-watching calculations of early industrial capitalists to the psychological antidote used by contemporary urban elites. To combat midnight KPIs, espresso uses its 9 bars pressure to state a profound thesis. In the grand narrative of modern civilization, every single one of us is using this black, emulsified fluid to ruthlessly pawn tomorrow. Alertness to pay for today. Cafe Americano is crafted by diluting an espresso shot with hot water. Compared to espresso, an Americano yields a larger volume, a lighter mouthfeel, and a stretched, expansive aromatic spectrum. It is designed for slow consumption, allowing the palate to easily track the bittersweet transitions driven by the roast. In food physical chemistry, a traditional espresso is a characteristically high concentration multiphase emulsion, while it delivers an instantaneous, hammer-like signal to the central nervous system. Its exceptionally high osmotic pressure and concentrated polyphenols can trigger intense gastric mucosal irritation and digestive tract stress when consumed on an empty stomach or under extreme physical exhaustion. The biochemical core of the Americano is, at its essence, a systematic deconstruction of concentration gradients by bluntly injecting a vast volume of hot water into the espresso. The absolute mass of the liquid's chemical constituents, such as caffeine and chlorogenic acids, suffers zero physical reduction. However, this dilution radically suppresses the chemical activity density, dropping its osmotic pressure into an isotonic state closely mimicking human cellular fluid. This physiological refinement enables the body to absorb hydration and neural stimulants simultaneously with maximum efficiency, entirely avoiding the stomach's defensive purging reflexes. It strips away the performative ritual of coffee, re-engineering the liquid into a zero-burden, rapid ingestion fuel. The Americano that serves as standard equipment in global corporate office towers today did not emerge from the artistic inspiration of a master barista. It was a Genchaun Jixing Kolaun, battlefield makeshift ration, hammered out by the geopolitical clashes and cultural frictions of World War II throughout the war. Coffee was treated by the United States military as an absolute strategic asset. In the official C rations and K rations issued to the front lines, bulk purchased dehydrated instant coffee powder was a mandatory, legally enforced standard. American soldiers grew accustomed to heating large pools of water in heavy enamel mugs, dumping in the powder, and gulping it down like water to maintain the hour neural alertness required for continuous combat operations. When Allied forces landed in Italy in Incendio by Sicilian, these GIS, hardwired to industrial-grade diluted coffee, collided head-on with Italy's century-old espresso tradition. For a soldier with highly strung nerves on a battlefield, desperately needing hydration and rapid heat, the espresso prized by the Italians was a biochemical disaster. It was comically tiny, intensely bitter, thick, and utterly useless for quenching thirst or swilling on a forced march. To recreate the flavor profile of their home front combat rations, American troops began demanding that baristas provide a full cup of boiling water, into which they directly dumped the espresso to dilute it. This crude desecration of espresso mechanics inflicted deep visual and psychological trauma upon traditional Italian baristas, with an attitude bordering on absolute disgust. They pinned a profoundly sarcastic label onto this thinned fluid, caffè, literally meaning the dishwater garbage only uncultured American brutes would drink. The Italians won the battle of linguistic mockery, but the Americans won the entire world. Following the conclusion of World War II, fueled by the financial transfusions of the Marshall Plan, the establishment of the U.S. dollar hegemony, and the global deployment of American military bases, this American dishwater, once reviled by European elites, unleashed a terrifying geopolitical swallowing force. It systematically formatted the modern work routines of post-war Japan and contemporary South Korea. Behind this expansion lay a calculated optimization of human time engineered after the Second Industrial Revolution. An authentic Italian espresso is an art form bound strictly to space and the present. It demands absolute immediacy, requiring the consumer to down the fluid within 2 minutes of extraction, before the crema dissipates and the volatile flavor profile structurally decays. It commands you to halt your labor, step away from production, and sit within the enclave of the KFD. The Americano, however, uses water molecules to physically lock down the rate of flavor degradation. It becomes exceptionally tolerant of time delays, whether served piping hot or iced, whether abandoned for 30 minutes or 2 hours. Its core biochemical architecture undergoes zero structural decomposition. This unique resilience made it the world's first industrial coffee capable of being poured into a paper cup, sealed with a plastic lid, and consumed on the move, anytime, anywhere during a sprint, a drive, a corporate meeting, or a grueling shift on an assembly line. From the blood-chilling trenches of the European theater to the iced Americanos powering East Asian white-collar workers through late-night, high-pressure corporate schedules. This black fluid smashed through the taste barriers erected by old-world European classes. Utilizing a logic of brutal efficiency and extreme convenience, it has cemented itself as the single most indispensable spiritual catalyst on the modern globalized assembly line. In contemporary public perception, mocha has become synonymous with a sweet, heavy beverage blended from chocolate syrup, milk, and espresso. Yet, across the realms of geobotany and global trade history, mocha was never a mere recipe. It was humanity's very first globally dominant coffee myth. Its name originates from Mocha, the port of Mocha, an ancient Yemeni harbor on the Red Sea coast now buried under desert sands. Yemen's geographical ecosystem is exceptionally hostile. Its native coffee trees grow on desert cliffs exceeding altitudes of 2,000 meters, facing the extreme physiological stress of severe drought and high ultraviolet radiation. These ancient Yemeni landraces were forced to concentrate their cellular soluble sugars and chlorogenic acid degradants to the absolute limit for survival. Deprived of water infrastructure, local cultivators relied on the most primitive natural process, letting the cherries dry directly on the branches or stone rooftops. Over weeks of intense sun exposure, the concentrated fructose of the fruit pulp infused during subsequent high temperature roasting. This triggered a violent Maillard reaction. This unique combination of genetic duress and rustic processing allowed Yemeni beans to miraculously synthesize a wild, microscopic aromatic hydrocarbon spectrum. a flawless interplay of high purity dark chocolate and fermented berries. This entirely natural chocolate mimicry became the coveted black gold of Western aristocrats 5 centuries ago. Throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, the Ottoman Empire recognized the absolute spiritual and psychological dominance this black fluid held over the Western world. To enforce a total geo-economic monopoly, the empire transformed the port of Mocha into an airtight biochemical fortress. Originally, coffee was a sacred medicinal tool utilized by Yemeni Sufi monks to maintain mental clarity during exhausting all-night prayers. As secularized trade exploded, the Ottoman state executed an ironclad decree. Any green, viable coffee bean capable of germination was strictly forbidden from crossing the Red Sea. Every batch of seeds loaded onto vessels at Mocha had to be boiled in scalding water or lightly baked prior to departure, systematically destroying embryonic vitality. This absolute chokehold on the global caffeine supply subjected European powers to intense strategic anxiety while extracting fortunes in silver. The maritime corporate titans of the Age of Sail understood a fundamental truth. Whoever shattered the biochemical lock of Mocha would reformat the wealth distribution of the planet. The historical dam burst in 1616. Pieter van den Broeke, a corporate spy for the Dutch East India Company, leveraged masterclass disguises and strategic bribery to successfully smuggle several live coffee seedlings out of Yemen. The Dutch nurtured these precious embers inside the botanical greenhouses of Amsterdam before rapidly deploying them to their colonial stronghold, the island of Java in Asia. This operation, one of the earliest and most consequential acts of corporate espionage in human history, completely shattered the Ottoman Empire, as century-long monopoly over Mocha, as Java coffee flooded Europe at a fraction of the industrial cost. The global axis of caffeine power permanently migrated from the Red Sea Straits to Western maritime capital. By the 19th century, with the opening of the Suez Canal and the ascendancy of deep-draft steamships, the long-silted port of Mocha, unable to accommodate modern vessels, decayed into a barren ghost port. Yet, within humanity, as collective memory, the word mocha remained permanently welded to high-quality, chocolate-toned coffee. By the mid-20th century, as the Italian espresso wave engulfed the globe, transnational coffee conglomerates encountered a distinct commercial barrier. The mass consumer palate fiercely rejected the high-pressure bitterness of pure espresso, while cheap, bulk commercial commodity blends completely lacked the delicate, natural cocoa aromatics of ancient Yemeni landraces. In response, the modern food industry engineered a highly calculating game of flavor parasitism. If stable chocolate profiles could not be grown naturally within the bean, they would simply inject high-calorie chocolate syrup, high-fat milk, and heavy whipped cream directly into the cup, borrowing the legendary name of the port buried beneath the Red Sea sands. They christened the sugar bomb the Café Mocha. This stands as a supreme irony in commercial history. Once, mocha was an elite ecological art form that utilized arid stress and vertical cliffs to lock highly concentrated plant fructose inside cellular structures. Today, it has been inverted into a mass-market placebo, using industrial refined sugars and trans fats to camouflage the structural defects of low-grade commercial beans from the sealed Ottoman biochemical strongholds, bordering Red Sea reefs to the sweet, frothy cups resting on corporate desks worldwide. The term mocha has traversed the cycles of geopolitics via the most absurd trajectory. It documents not only the desperate flight of a plant species under imperial chokeholds, but illustrates exactly how modern commerce uses cheap industrial additives to permanently reformat a sacred geographic totem into a hollow consumer symbol. A latte consists of espresso and a large volume of steamed milk, typically crowned with a thin layer of milk foam. It features a mild taste, with milk providing sweetness and a silky texture that softens the intensity of the espresso. It is omnipresent in modern cafes due to its approachability and capacity to accommodate different bean profiles. Nutritionally, its calories and protein stem primarily from milk, making it a beverage packed with distinct dairy nutrition. Unlike black coffee, for many, a latte is not a rapid jolt of alertness, but a gentler moment of respite. If a cappuccino is a physical, layered confrontation between solid foam and espresso, the essence of a cafe latte is an interfacial, multi-phase fusion calculated down to the bedrock of fluid dynamics. A latte rejects the coarse, high, aeration dry foam of a cappuccino through minute, highly regulated air intake control. It violently shears liquid milk and microbubbles into a micromicron wet foam. The physical attributes of this fluid are highly specific. Its thixotropy and viscosity are near perfectly isomorphic to the freshly extracted espresso crema. This means that, when injected into the coffee, it penetrates and completely encapsulates every single bitter polyphenol molecule in a laminar flow. Concurrently, thermodynamic temperature control is the absolute lifeblood of latte flavor. When milk is precisely heated to 60 degrees Celsius to 65 degrees Celsius, the internal beta-lactoglobulin undergoes an optimal conformational alteration, and lactose solubility reaches its peak dynamic equilibrium, absent any refined sugar. This maximizes the release of the native sweetness of the dairy colloid, utilizing a massive milk-to-coffee ratio of 1:3 or even 1:5. It erects a gentle lipid defense line, completely taming the violence and aggression inherent to the primal flavor profiles of diploid or tetraploid coffee beans. While the pairing of coffee and milk, cafe latte, had existed for centuries as a rustic household breakfast staple across continental Europe, including Italy, France, and Spain, the elevation of the latte into an independent, standardized commercial commodity that ultimately reshaped the global coffee market was driven by the demanding palates of mid-20th century American consumers. Following World War XXIX, bar espresso machines catalyzed by Gaggia swept through the Western world. However, this dark fluid, packed with a violent extraction of industrial machinery, high concentration, and severe bitterness, completely alienated the palates of middle-class Americans accustomed to mild, large-volume drip coffee. At the cultural crossroads of Berkeley, California, facing a collective consumer revolt against espresso, its aggressive profile, Italian immigrant baristas were forced to execute a compromise in taste to sustain their livelihoods. They transplanted the dairy coffee pairing, once confined to private European home kitchens, onto the modern commercial bar. This standardized high-volume, hyper-diluted, and lipid, heavy modern latte was, at its core, a de-radicalized weaponization, enacted by American consumerism upon hardcore European industrial caffeine, through mountains of industrial fat and lactose. It successfully downgraded and domesticated a liquid originally built as a neurotoxin, an extreme stimulant, into a liquid dessert fit for mass assembly, line ingestion, and middle-class leisure. Entering the 21st century, the latte executed the most stunning cross-border leap in the history of global agricultural trade, alienating itself from a mere physical beverage into the most critical social currency and geoeconomic barometer of the modern globalized metropolis. Within macroeconomics, economists even formulated the latte index, leveraging the completely standardized price of a latte across different countries and cities to precisely calculate the purchasing power parity and inflationary thresholds of diverse global economies. Meanwhile, the latte art adorning the surface, originally a mere fluid, dynamics coincidence has been completely shifted into the baseline chip of the visual symbolic economy, under the age of smartphones and algorithms. Whether a latte is deemed acceptable has migrated from the sensory validation of the tongue to the pixelated quality control of a smartphone camera. Furthermore, the plant, milk politics sparked by the latte in recent years, is quietly reshaping the global agricultural landscape. Emerging transnational capital entities, Weaponizing oat and coconut milks have systematically harvested the environmental anxieties and lactose intolerance pain points of urban elites. Forcing plant fiber emulsions to substitute for traditional pasteurized dairy, they have severed the century-old parasitic dependency of the livestock industry on caffeine. The latte, via its vast and accommodating fluid volume, proves a grand thesis within the epic narrative of modern civilization. Caffeine is merely a negligible pharmacological husk. The container holding it remains ready to undergo rapid, merciless self-upgrades, alongside the shifting gears of global capital distribution, class identity, and algorithmic aesthetics. A cappuccino consists of espresso, steamed milk, and thick milk foam, with traditional proportions emphasizing a precise balance between coffee milk and foam. Its name is commonly attributed to the color of the robes worn by Capuchin friars, a distinct brown that mirrors the hue of coffee blended with milk. Lighter than a latte with a higher volume of foam, it greets the palate first with soft, pillowy foam before revealing the coffee and milk beneath. While consuming a cappuccino in the morning is a staple of Italian life, ordering one in the afternoon breaks traditional etiquette, a habit rooted in how different cultures perceive milk, coffee, and the rhythm of the day. Within fluid food physics, the essence of a cappuccino is a high-precision density game played between gases, liquids, and solids, diverging sharply from the latte, which pursues smooth, fluid mobility. A standard traditional cappuccino enforces remarkably rigid physical boundaries, demanding an absolute equal one-to-one golden triangle stratification composed of espresso, hot milk, and milk protein foam. To maintain the geometric stability of this stratification, temperature control serves as the core biochemical lifeblood. When steam heating breaches 65 degrees Celsius, the lipids within the milk melt entirely, and whey proteins undergo excessive denaturation, triggering thermal aggregation. This causes the microscopic colloidal matrix to collapse completely, resulting in instantaneous bubble coarsening and drainage loss. Only by locking the temperature precisely at the critical threshold of 60 degrees Celsius can high-density dry foam construct a solid, light barrier at least 2 centimeters thick at the rim of the cup, flawlessly sealing off the volatile aromatic compounds of the espresso below. Yet, the flavor core of this unique interfacial fluid mechanics design hides a brutal encirclement that reshaped European history. While the word cappuccino evokes images of contemporary Italian romance today, its true incubator was Vienna, the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and its nomenclature stems directly from a religious war that altered the trajectory of Western civilization. In 1683, the Ottoman Empire launched its final campaign to plant the Islamic crescent flag into the heart of Europe, triggering the legendary Battle of Vienna. At the darkest hour of the siege, Marco di Aviano, a friar of the Order of Friars Minor Capuchin, Ordo Fratrum Minorum Capucinorum, stepped forward, utilizing unparalleled diplomatic leverage to convince King John III Sobieski of Poland to deploy his forces, breaking the siege of Vienna at the absolute last moment. Following the victory, the Viennese discovered massive stockpiles of green coffee beans, left behind in the captured Turkish military supplies. Finding traditional Turkish black coffee too intensely bitter, the Viennese, following Friar Diano's counsel, poured locally abundant fresh milk and honey into the brew to dilute the bitterness. The locals noticed with astonishment that once the milk and coffee fully integrated, the liquid assumed a deep reddish, brown hue. This exact shade perfectly matched the reddish, brown-hooded robes, cappuccio, worn by the Capuchin friars who had delivered the city. To pay homage to these heroes of the Holy League, the Viennese christened this novel concoction Kapuziner, the primordial prototype of the cappuccino. It was no culinary invention of a kitchen. It was a geopolitical fluid brewed from the spoils of war and blended with the color of religious habits. This Viennese Kapuziner underwent a total overhaul by the precision machinery industry of post-war Italy. In the 1950s, as commercial espresso machines universally adopted high-pressure steam wands, the Italians replaced the luxurious whipped cream floating atop the Viennese coffee with high-density, non-water-soluble milk protein foam extracted via thermodynamics. Consequently, the cappuccino formally mutated into the Italian cappuccino and was codified into rigid Italian breakfast regimens. By Italian tradition, because the high concentration of milk and dairy fat is difficult to digest later in the day, consuming a cappuccino past 11 a.m. is deemed a severe violation of culinary etiquette. Yet, the massive vessel of transnational capitalism eventually shattered this regional cultural discipline. At the close of the 20th century, the second wave of American coffee, spearheaded by Starbucks, subjected the cappuccino to strict industrial digital formatting. The sacred 1:1 ratio was dismantled into absolute metrics of ounces and milliliters, paired with standardized pasteurized milk, turning the drink into an industrial energy supply, flowing seamlessly through corporate cubicles worldwide, from a Holy League potion engineered outside the walls of Vienna to repel Ottoman war machines, to the clockwork discipline governing breakfast hours during the Italian economic miracle, to the high-calorie morning wake. Up fluid held in every hand across modern metropolises, the cappuccino, with its physical colloidal shield constructed from denatured proteins, coldly encapsulates centuries of geopolitical bloodshed and the homogenizing collusion of transnational capital. If you vacation in Greece during the summer, you find nearly everyone on the streets holding an iced coffee crowned with a thick layer of froth. Taking a single big sip fills your palate with cool refreshment and subtle sweetness. This is Greece's national summer beverage, the frappe. Its recipe is almost unbelievably simple, usually requiring nothing more than instant coffee powder, sugar, and a splash of cold water tossed into a shaker, vigorously shaken a few dozen times to erupt into a cloud-like, long-lasting foam that refuses to collapse, finished with ice cubes, cold water, or a touch of fresh milk. A perfect summer heat buster is complete. Yet you might never guess that this summer drink, dominating Greece for decades and sweeping across the Mediterranean, was born out of a salesman's makeshift desperation when no hot water could be found. At the 1957 Thessaloniki International Fair, Nislos salesman Dimitris Vakondios had worked a grueling day and urgently needed a coffee boost. The catch: there was no hot water left at the booth. Sweltering in temperatures over 30 degrees Celsius, staring at nothing but cold water and instant coffee powder, his eyes landed on a metal shaker used to make chocolate milkshakes for kids. Desperate times called for desperate measures. He dumped instant coffee, sugar, ice, and cold water inside and shook it furiously. When he popped the lid, he was stunned. Not only were there no undissolved lumps, but a mountain of rich brown foam surged forth, tasting icy and invigorating. This happy accident at the trade fair naturally sparked a coffee revolution across all of Greece. From that day forward, the frappe rapidly swept across Greece, becoming synonymous with the rhythm of Aegean life. In Greece, drinking a frappa is never about rushing. Rather, it is a living practice of the famous local philosophy, siga siga, slowly, slowly, under beach umbrellas along the coast. Ordering a frappe for just a few euros lets people gaze at the sea and chat with friends for 3 or 4 hours straight. Even as the ice inside slowly melts, the foam on top remains resolute, keeping every sip refreshingly sweet and cool. From an accidental experiment born of missing hot water at an expo booth, to an indispensable summer ritual beneath the Mediterranean sun, the frappe and its glass of frosty foam remind us, sometimes the sweetest surprises in life lie hidden within the casual little accidents, right at our fingertips. If you step into a pub on a freezing winter night searching for a drink that can both invigorate your spirits and warm your body, an Irish coffee is the ultimate choice. Despite the word coffee in its name, it is actually a remarkably authentic specialty cocktail. The recipe is fascinating. Pour a measure of Irish whiskey into hot coffee, add a touch of sugar, and cap the surface with a thick layer of chilled whipped cream. When drinking, whatever you do, do not stir the cream into the coffee. Lift a glass and sip straight from the rim. First, the cold, silky cream touches your lips, followed instantly by hot, whiskey-infused coffee cascading down your throat. The whiskey, its rich malt aromatics and subtle spicy kick miraculously draw out the coffee. Its natural sweet and bright notes warming your entire body in an instant. This liquor, infused coffee, was born on a dark, storm-plagued night. During the 1940s, the Foynes Flying Boat Base in Ireland served as a critical refueling stop for transatlantic flight routes. Planes back then lacked modern climate control systems. After a flight across the ocean, passengers were routinely left pale and shivering from the Atlantic gales. One night in 1943, a flight was forced to turn back due to terrible weather. Watching these freezing travelers enter his dining hall, airport chef Joe Sheridan thought, plain hot coffee isn't tea enough to thaw them out. They need something powerful. So he reached for a pour of local Irish whiskey, splashed it into hot coffee, capped it with a heavy layer of cream, and served it up. Surprised by the sudden rush of heat warming his body, a visiting American passenger asked, "Is this American coffee?" The chef smiled and replied, "No, that is Irish coffee." This comforting recipe born in an Irish airport soon crossed the ocean to San Francisco, carried by a globe-trotting travel journalist. To get the cream to float perfectly atop the liquid without sinking, San Francisco bartenders went so far as to consult local dairy experts, experimenting repeatedly with whipped cream density until they finally mastered the classic pour. When the first perfect Irish coffee made its debut on the San Francisco bar, this drink, blending the rich acidity of coffee, the warmth of whiskey, and the sweet richness of cream, swept rapidly across the globe. In moments choked by cold, it stands as more than just a cup of coffee. It remains a romantic legend that banishes the chill through spirits and genuine human warmth.